Thank you. Thanks, Judy, for your kind remarks. Let me just start by saying that, like probably almost everybody in the room that not only has been involved in this, but is part of this whole enterprise or in any leadership position, it does take a team of people to make all of us look good. And so I especially want to thank not only King and Judy and the rest of the organizing committee, but in particular in help of the Enabling Systems Committee and all of the work that went into that. A number of people, but certainly Chuck Smuckler, Ann Borns, Kate Riley, Aubrey that came along today and helped put this PowerPoint together, our moderators today, our panelists, our poster session submitters, and then all the people that helped to synthesize the last 2 days in our roundtable discussions that contributed to the presentation today. Let me just say, I was at the initial meeting of the consortium back in 2008, I guess, in San Francisco, and I think I was one of maybe, I don't know, less than 5 administrators, both from central and from global health units. I'm astonished at how many of you are here today. And those of you that are on the front lines of what I like to say, changing the world, you have a lot of people that want to help you do that. And so hopefully through the Enabling Systems frameworks that we can put together to help will give people a little bit of a jump start that need it in order to provide that help and assistance to you. So I'm going to take you on a little travelogue of what we've talked about over the last couple of days. Extremely invigorating conversation, very well attended, lots of great ideas, really well thought out panel discussions covering various topics that I'll go into. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the panels, very, very short about some of what we saw in the poster sessions, some learning and observations that I've kind of summarized from the last couple of days, a challenge to you all, and then where it might make sense for the CUGH to move forward in terms of enabling system support. And let me just say, somebody made a very, I think, important comment at the roundtables that we had, thanking the CUGH for being, having the foresight to have an enabling systems subcommittee. So again, the founding members and the board of directors, kudos to you for remembering that us that need to help you do this are as important part of the partnership as all of you that actually do this work on a day-to-day basis. So, in terms of structures and support, various universities are trying to put different mechanisms in place to try to address some of the administrative support challenges in helping you do the work internationally. And what we have found here, certainly at the University of Washington and through our discussions over the last couple of days, is that the active mobilization of your administrative support resources is absolutely critical. And it has to be done in an interdisciplinary way. It isn't an option, it's a must. You have to be able to balance all of the needs from HR to legal to risk management, safety and security, and so on, and they all have to come together to try to solve some of these really, really challenging administrative issues. The models that we heard from varied. One particular model led by a faculty member trying to bite off one piece at a time and solve some problems that matter to her global health unit, some driven by central offices like at the university. What we also learned was that it really doesn't matter how big or small you are, whether you're public or private, you have what you need to solve these problems. And you just have to kind of come together to try to figure it out. And hopefully CUGH can provide a little bit of glue and a pathway. We also learned from the panel that we had that almost all of the universities that are trying to address some of these issues are integrally involving faculty and students in helping to set the priorities for what they're going to work on. And that was really interesting to and reassuring to see. Some best practices that we learned. That you can move and manage cash, really big buckets of it, and it can be done in a safe and controlled and helpful manner. We learned a lot about some very helpful vendor services and processes on campuses that can help you do that. And it does mean that you have to challenge yourselves in the level of risk you're willing to take on. I'm talking to the administrators, the lawyers, and the risk managers in the room. You have to really come to grips with the fact that in order to advance this work, you have to get over over some of that, and there are mechanisms that can help to mitigate risk. We heard a lot about some interesting safety and security programs. Sort of the trend that we heard across all of them was that they are almost all anchored by very robust pre-departure orientation programs for both students and faculty. Some even include staff and graduate students in those orientations that incorporate all of those technical areas that we're talking about, and including some either very robust or at least some nod to the fact that there has to be some evaluation of student readiness. Some don't do it at all, and that's probably a risk. That universities that are doing this in a very robust and thoughtful way are engaging legal counsel in very active ways. And I mean engaging, it's not an adjective, so sorry, lawyers. Using your legal counsel in very helpful ways. A good program leads with a service orientation, that if you go into it saying you have to do this, no you can't do that, it's really going to be difficult to collaborate. So what we're seeing from good programs is that they really are doing it from a how can I help, let's start working on something. And that never, you can never communicate enough, and I think that's been said a lot amongst the different groups over the last couple of days. That nonetheless, you do have to identify what some of the regulatory pitfalls are. You may decide at the end of the day that there are just some rules, I'm here to tell you, we've had to have this conversation here, that you may not be able to comply with right now today. But if they're really important or your exposure risk is really high, you ought to put a plan in place to get there. But you ought to be aware and you ought to be willing to lay it all out on the table in order for you to prioritize and manage your risk effectively. Build on existing practices. Working with external providers. Many of us use vendors and other services to provide bridge services, like Price Waterhouse can do some stuff before you're actually on the ground, fully staffed, ready to go. So use what you can. Use the services that are out there. Use people at the university in very effective ways. Even people that have some capacity. I know that's really hard in these times, but there may be some people, it was suggested, that really have some untapped capacity that can help you bring people together or nonetheless do some problem solving. Try to bring your administrative support folks to your sites. It's life-changing. It does help for people like me to see with their own eyes how these operations work, what some of the challenges are. Sit down with the people in the field to really get a sense of what their needs are. I can't tell you how critical that is if you're able to do it. We had a very lively discussion today about the legal issues, sort of dropping down a level. Our first session was all about frameworks and approaches and what kinds of things work. Then we drop down a level and say, okay, so what did we learn about safety and security, legal, and managing cash, and so on. So registration ins and outs. When to register? Why should we register at all? Options to consider. We had a really great panel of a legal counsel, a lawyer in country, a country director, and an HR or labor and employment specialist. So it was a really nicely balanced group, really, really interesting information. That collaboration with lawyers is critical. Have a conversation about whether the lawyer on your campus is an advisor or a decision maker. You need to know who the decision makers and the stakeholders are and reach out to them. That when you're trying to register your operations, legal, risk management, finance, tax, all those things intersect and have to be balanced and coordinated together, and that the legal issues can be managed. So some of the learnings, I have a minute, right? So I'm going to talk really fast. This is all easy to read, but what we learned from the administrators that are here, many of whom this is the first time, well, most of whom this is the first time they've been to CUGH, there was a lot of comfort in the fact that some of these challenges weren't just things they were experiencing. I mean, you hear that at conferences all the time, but definitely true here. A strong willingness to share best practices and be involved in making solutions. And that, again, back to that interdisciplinary goal. That universities that have tried to solve this, they've just decided to do it. Let's pick a problem and solve it, and then build on that and move ahead. Looking for champions on their campus that can help to bring people together or get people to come to a meeting has been critical for some. That budget is not the only barrier. It's probably even a secondary barrier to trying to problem solve around some of these issues. It really is about time and willingness to come together and make some bold solutions. So here's the challenge I have for all of you. It'd be a real shame if we came back here in a year and everybody was having the same problems. So we'll try to help at CUGH. I'll talk about that in a second. But find somebody on your campus that can help you solve a problem and solve it. Then publicize it, celebrate it, recognize it, get people really excited about it, and then pick another problem. Just solve one. Just pick one that is solvable, and you'll be amazed at how engaged people will get around that if you make a big deal and get really excited about it. So what can CUGH do? I'll do this really quickly. There really isn't any need for anybody to reinvent the wheel. There's lots of information out there. I think the challenge will be to synthesize it, coordinate it, organize it in a way that's helpful. So we got a lot of really good suggestions from the roundtable about how to do that. A website, reaching out to other organizations that have been in this business for a really long time and figuring out how to take advantage of some of the expertise that they already have. Maybe having some regional work groups among the administrative folks to really do some hardcore problem solving and tool development. And then certainly this group wants to stay in close contact with each other and have an open forum that is ongoing, so perhaps a listserv. So lots for CUGH to think about and structure and move forward. And I think that is the end. Yes, so again, thank you. It was a pleasure to be part of this. Again, I'm so pleased with how many of you are here, not only the administrators, but everybody else. And I think that it's just extremely exciting about what's to come. So thank you very much.